Hello, YouTube land. This is Brenton coming to you from Lexington, Kentucky, the Bluegrass State. Before we get started, if anyone out there has a story they'd like to share here on this show, you can contact me at brentonsawin@gmail.com. I'll leave that email address in the description below. If anyone wants to contribute to help with this show, you can go to a link in the description also, PayPal me. And thank you to everyone who has contributed. Today we have a lady named Pat from Oklahoma, and I'm going to let her introduce herself here in a second. And we have some like Bigfoot and UFO and ghost kind of stuff. I've heard some of the stories, and they're very interesting. So I think you all are going to enjoy this. So anyway, let's just go straight to the guest, and if you would, Pat, introduce yourself and kind of tell like where you're from and you know what you want to say, and we'll go from there.
Hello, my name is Pat. I'm from Lawton, Oklahoma. It's 48 miles from the Red River to Texas, and my husband was in the Army, and we met here in Lawton. Got married, and he was from Albuquerque, New Mexico. So every year for deer hunting, when we could, we would go to New Mexico deer hunting, usually about 50 miles south of Albuquerque. And in November of 1970, we had seen no deer at Magdalena Mountain, south of Albuquerque. My husband had a friend who was a game warden, and he told him, well, we might go down to Corona, New Mexico, and hunt there, that they were having a really good season. So we took off, drove down to Corona, and we were about maybe 9 miles outside of Corona. Corona is a very small town. It's in the area that they call the Pinto Bean, capital of the United States. And we had a tent camper. It was really nice. It had the aluminum body, and it popped up. It had a hard top, had lights you could hook up to a car battery. It had 2 full beds on the end. It had a dinette that seated 4 people, a sink, a 2-burner stove, and a couch. So it was a nice camper. And we went down this road to this national forest about 7 miles, and there we found a really nice meadow, and we camped there. And we had enough time to go scope out the area to see where we were going to set up to hunt for deer the next morning. And there had been a bonfire out in this meadow. And when we went up under the scrub oak and the scrub pines, and if you're familiar with desert-type plants, you know what I'm talking about. It was mostly sandy under the trees with pine needles and cedar needles and stuff. But there were a lot of what looked to me like maybe a basketball team, football, young guys running around barefooted in this. And my husband and I were talking about this, and we were laughing, saying there must have been a really wild party going on with that bonfire. And it was still very warm. So on the left of our camper was a small butte. Then there was about maybe about 150, 200 feet over to this taller butte. And we decided we would set up right in front of the small butte was a game trail, that we would set up on that butte and watch that game trail. And the next morning when we got up, there were 2 bobcats playing. There was a couple of deer out in the meadow eating, and there were a covey of quail. So we knew there was a lot of game in the area. Looked very promising. So we got ready, and we went up and we set up on the butte. Well, we were sitting there hour after hour after hour. If you're a hunter, you know what I'm talking about. If you're a fisherman, you know what I'm talking about. And at about 10:30 or so, my husband said, honey, I'm going to go down. And on our right was a very tiny meadow. I mean, maybe 30 feet across by 30 feet long. Very tiny. And he said, I'm going to go down here on your right, go out by the camper and come back, see if I can't get some deer steering, he said, because they're going to start bedding down for the day. And I had a new rifle. It was a 243 BSA. And it was a bolt action. I was used to lever. And I told him, I said, no. I said, I'm not that used to this rifle, so let me go, and you watch for the deer if I flush any. So I went down, and I literally had to crawl down the side of this butte to get into this little meadow. And when I'm going through the meadow, I look down. Now, the last house we'd seen was about 6 miles back. It was a farmhouse. There was an Angora, long-haired, white and black and yellow rabbit laying there with its head tore off, and blood was still pumping out of the carotid artery. Well, I knew cats did this, and they had told us that there had been 3 mountain lions killed just that hunting season that started around like the 3rd of November. And because of an incident that happened when I was a young girl, I was very leery of mountain lions. I had been stalked by one for 4 years, so yes, I was scared of them. And so I start scoping under the trees looking for either a bobcat or a mountain lion. And I'm walking as I'm going toward the end of this out toward the meadow, the larger meadow. And I see in the shadows, and the sun sort of shining in on it, I see what looks like the rump of a bear. Now, I did have a bear license. Didn't really want to kill one, but I would shoot it if I had to. So I'm watching this, and I had stopped, and I had my rifle up, and I was watching it. And it wasn't black, though. The sun was shining on it, and it was looking sort of a reddish color. And I was thinking to myself, what am I seeing? And it stood up and turned around and walked toward me. Now, this thing was 12 to 15 feet from me when it stopped. I'm sorry if my voice is shaking a little bit because it's still the fear I felt when I saw it. It still affects me. It had its face behind the tree in shadow. And I stood there with my rifle up, had it sighted at what I thought would be as close to its neck area as I could get. And my mind was almost in shock because I'm flashing back to those barefoot prints we had seen under the trees, and here is this creature that was 7 to 7.5 feet tall, and it was almost a cinnamon red. It was lanky. It didn't. I knew I was seeing a Bigfoot. It didn't look like Patty. Now I'm in southern New Mexico. I never expected to see a Bigfoot. Okay. The thing that scared me so much is its arms. It was standing up straight, and its hands were below its knees. And I'm standing there. I have my rifle up. I'm watching it. And it's just standing there. I could see the side of its head, but like I say, the face and the left side of its shoulder and part of its left leg was in shadow. And while it's standing there watching me, very nonchalantly reach down, and it scratches itself like a man will scratch his groin. So I knew it's a male. And it was so big, I was thinking maybe it would have me in one step if it decided to charge me. And I'm taking in everything, the fur or the hair. It didn't look like fur. It sure didn't look like an ape. It seemed like it was forever. My husband was watching me. He said he knew I had seen something he didn't know what I had seen, because it was in the trees were between it and him. And he said he looked at his watch, and he was just about deciding to come down to see what I was looking at. And I'll tell you exactly how I felt. I felt like I was looking at a grizzly bear with a .22 rifle. That's how much firepower I felt like I had. I thought, if I really have to shoot this thing, I better try to make it a good shot, because I'll probably only get one shot off. And my husband said it was like 3 minutes or so, 3 or 4, before I finally put my gun down. But it just finally turned and literally glided. You know how these cross-country skiers on the Olympics look, how they glide?
Yeah.
Well, that's how this walked. It just glided into the woods, going toward the larger butte, which is where I was going to have to come through to get back to the butte where I'd come down from. And I didn't tell my husband, because my husband was the kind of man that if he couldn't taste it, touch it, or see it, it didn't exist. And I knew that if I told him what I'd seen, he'd say, "Oh, wow, let's go look and see if we can find it." I didn't want to see if I could find it. I didn't want to see it again.
Right.
So I got out to the main. There was maybe 6 feet of woods between the small meadow and the big meadow. I got out that way. Then I came running back through the woods. And the footprints, I came across its trail because the sand was still falling into the footprint. So I knew which way it was going. And I ran through, and I got to the base of the butte. Just as I got to the base, a herd of deer came through, and my husband shot a buck. And he was yelling at me to shoot, shoot. I was so out of breath, I didn't care about shooting. I couldn't take a steady enough shot, okay? So we drug his deer basically almost to the area where this thing was trying to bed down. In hindsight, I think it was probably watching us. And it never expected either that, or it had come through, had the rabbit, was tearing its head off, dropped it when it heard us or saw us up there, and it was trying to hide when I saw it. Those are my 2 ideas about what it was doing there, because it was definitely trying to lay down when I saw it. But we gutted my husband's deer, and he always liked liver and onions after the evening that he'd shoot a deer, or I'd shoot a deer. And that day I told him that I didn't feel like cooking liver and onions, so let's just leave the gut pile on this rock. And literally, I was leaving it as an offering, because right by our camper was some trees, and we were going to hang the deer up in those trees. And I was scared to death that this thing was going to come down to our camper because of this fresh meat. So that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept the light on in the camper. I kept my gun right by me, loaded. And my husband was like, "What is wrong with you?" And just before sundown, there had been some more campers come in that they camped about 600 yards from us. And I told him it was those other campers made me nervous. So I couldn't sleep. We got up the next morning, packed up his gear and the deer, and we came back toward Oklahoma. And we were into Texas almost 100 miles before I told him what I had seen.
So when you saw this thing, did it? You're saying it looked like a cinnamon red color and was lanky. Did it seem like it was maybe like a teenage?
I didn't get the feeling it was full grown. No,
Right.
It didn't look full grown. It looked, like I said, it was lanky looking, and there was a lot of animals, a lot of deer, a lot of food in the area. So, to me, especially from the size of the tracks, they looked like maybe they were about 14 or 15 inches long. Because we were thinking maybe it was a basketball team.
Right.
That, there was nothing Bigfoot about I had kept up with all of the cryptology things about Bigfoot. They always and I always was like, okay, they live in Washington or Canada. They're not going to be down here where I'm at. They're not going to be, where we went hunting all the time, that was a huge mountain. You had to drive 25 miles around the mountain to even get to the ranch that my husband's dad owned, where we hunted. We almost always got a deer there, a mule deer, and my husband hated to hunt whitetail because they're so small compared to muleys. So I never expected to see this thing in New Mexico.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it doesn't seem like a place you would find Bigfoot. So did when you looked at it, and did you get like a good view of his face?
No, he kept his face in the shadow of the tree. He was looking through the tree, but all I could see was shadow. I could see, like, if you take your hand and you go around sort of the side of your face, your ear, and the crown. I didn't see, like, any eyebrow ridge, nothing like that. I didn't see any lump on the top of the head because I only saw the side of the head. I saw almost all of the chest, almost all of both legs, but part of him he kept in shadow. And I literally, I have to tell you, I don't know if I could have stood it if I saw the face. I was so shocked, so stunned, and horrified. I was horrified by how long its arms were.
Wow, that's amazing.
And
did it seem really human-like to you, or from what you did see?
It made me think alien. It didn't look like any creature I had ever seen. It didn't walk like a bear. It didn't really walk like a man. It glided. Mm-hmm. That's all. It just looked like it just turned, and it was so smooth. It turned and it just glided through those woods. And, it was...
Yeah, that's real common. People talk about they glide. They're so smooth with their motions. There's no wasted motion at all.
No. And like I say, when I first saw it, all I saw was the rump. And I thought it was a bear because it was sort of in shadow. There was shade sort of, dappling off its bottom. And I can still see the sun hitting that part and it looking, the hairs almost looked translucent on the top. You know what I'm saying? They weren't like...
So do you think it was laying down trying to be hidden? And then...
Yes, it was going down on its stomach when I saw it. So it had its bottom sticking up in the air.
Right. And it was doing that on purpose trying to hide.
I think it was trying to hide. And I've often thought that maybe it had tore the head off this rabbit. Now, an Angora rabbit is a domestic rabbit. It's not a wild rabbit. And for the blood to still be pumping out, it had to have just happened. And we were very focused in front of us, not looking at all down to the side on our right. We were looking at the game trail.
And then at some point, did you think that it knew that you were looking at it and then it just stood up?
Yes. I think maybe, because like I say, all I could see was the bottom. The sun was sort of hitting that. I think maybe he knew I stopped.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when he stood up. Because he sort of got up like from his knees, and then he just stood up and turned and took one step. And I mean, he was maybe 5 feet into the grass and in the bottom of those woods there. He took one step, and the only thing separating him from me was 12 foot and part of a tree that he had his face and his left shoulder and part of the side of his left side of his body.
So when he took that step, was that toward you?
That was toward me, yes.
Oh, goodness.
And then he just stopped, and that was when I brought the gun up, and I put it as... Now, you know, I've heard so many people say they have no necks. This thing still did have a neck. It wasn't a real long neck, but that's where I sighted it, was just above on us where your neck divots in.
Yeah, right.
Because I thought if I got a shot off, maybe I would cripple it if I shot it through the neck.
Oh, yeah. That would probably put it down.
Yeah, because looking at it, I mean,
even though you thought your gun was small, you shoot something in the neck with the type of gun you had, that's going to put the animal down. I don't care how big it is.
Yeah,
you know?
and I had hollow points in it. My husband always reloaded, so he reloaded it with a hot round. Mm-hmm. And I knew that it would tumble. Right. So I thought, okay, that would maybe be the best part if I got a shot that could hurt it.
Do you feel like it knew that you had a gun?
Oh yes. I think that's why it hit its face.
Mm-hmm.
I think it still felt like it was sort of hiding.
Right. Because a lot of times they are. If they stand still, you know, it's like you'll second guess yourself.
Well, I mean, its body was out in the open. It was just its face, and like I say, part of the left shoulder and the arm. And in fact, the left arm is what he scratched himself with.
He scratched his groin?
He scratched his groin. Yes.
Wow, that's so crazy.
I didn't see testicles, but I did see the dangly bit.
Yeah.
You know, it was just sort of like, it wasn't like, here, look at this. It was just like, I'm standing here and I'm looking at you and I got to scratch myself.
Yeah, it's a typical dude thing, you know. It's like,
kind of
like watching football here, you know, and you mess me around here.
Yeah, and that sort of took me, that shocked me, you know, because I was like, well, it's a male, okay, doesn't look like an ape, not human, not some fool in a suit out here during hunting season. Where did that rabbit come from? Didn't see anything about any cats. So I really think maybe this thing was walking across that meadow with this rabbit, twisted its head off, maybe heard us talking, and dropped it and decided to hide.
Right. Wow.
And by that time, I was down, and it heard me stop. Maybe I took a gasp, I don't know. But for some reason, it didn't finish laying down. It stood up and turned around and took, and like I say, it was 5 foot. It took one step. And that's why I thought I got maybe one step, and then it's got me. You know, one step, and then a step, and I'm out. So I might get one shot off. my husband said that he was actually at the point he was getting ready to come down from the butte to see what I was staring at, because he knew that I was terrified of mountain lions. And so he thought that that's maybe what I was watching, was a mountain lion. And so the next morning, he wanted me to get a deer. And I kept telling him, no, that's okay. I don't need a deer. We've got your deer. It's warm. We need to get home and get it refrigerated and get it butchered up and everything. And he just couldn't understand why I didn't want to go on and finish the hunt. And so the next morning, lo and behold, we go out again, and we go on to the Tall Butte, which is where I saw the creature go to. And I'm terrified. I am literally shaking in my boots. But I'm trying not to let my husband see it. And when we get up on the butte, instead of setting up and looking for deer and everything, he says, okay, honey, now I'm going to leave you up here, and I'm going to go down through the woods and try to steer up some deer. And let's see if you can get your game tags. And I was like, to myself, you have got to be kidding me. You're going to leave me up here on this butte with this thing. So I'm watching him, and I'm constantly looking around me because I'm scared to death that one of them, or I didn't know they came in family pairs. I'm thinking it's by itself. So I'm like, okay, is this thing going to come out and get me before I can get off this butte? So as soon as I saw my husband get out in the meadow, I booked it down off him. I didn't look for any deer. I didn't look for anything except the creature I'd seen the day before. And so when I'm going down, just as I start down at the very bottom of the butte, there's probably about 15 feet of woods in the sandy soil, and it was more sand than anything. It was just sand and dried needles. It's footprints with the sand still falling in, going back toward the small butte. So I book it out to my husband, and I say, okay, I didn't see any deer. Let's go. And we left, and we came back to Oklahoma. And
he's probably thinking, man, this woman's got something going on here.
But he was like, what is wrong with you? I was always very adventurous, sometimes more than I should have been maybe, but I was always I knew my capacity. I knew what I could and couldn't do. I never wanted to have to kill a bear, but I would have. If I did, I would have shot a mountain lion in a heartbeat. Like I say, I was literally, from the time I was 9 till the time I was 13, I was shadowed by a mountain lion. My dad saw it, my mother saw it, my brothers, my sister, they all saw it. It never killed any of our animals. It never took a pig. It never took a piglet. The only thing it ever did when we lived in Arkansas, we had 2 5,000 chicken houses, 5,000 chickens in each house. And in the summertime, the last 2 weeks, you usually leave the lights on at night where the chickens will think it's day, and they'll eat all the time and really put on rapid weight. But they get real jumpy because of the feed you're feeding them. And this mountain lion came up, and we had a pile up, and we lost almost 900 chickens in one night. So that was the only thing we ever lost from it. Now, a lot of our neighbors lost dogs to it. But because of that, I was always very leery when I knew there was a cat in the woods.
Wow.
But,
I mean, how many chickens in one night?
Almost 900. They
sure
piled
that
up
was
by the doors. Oh,
Are you
yeah.
sure that was a mountain lion?
Oh, yeah. We saw the tracks where he reared up. We had just chicken wire over the big doors because it was in the summer. It was really hot. And we had all the windows open, chicken wire around them. And there was no grass there in front of the door. It was just sawdust and shavings and stuff and dirt. And you could see his tracks. You could see even where he had reared up. The chicken wire was sort of pushed in and about 6 feet up. And you could see where his hind feet, his hind paws, had pushed farther, deeper into the soil. And it was right there on each side of that door where the chickens had piled up, and they just basically smothered the ones underneath them.
Okay.
But,
well, you said you had two Bigfoot encounters.
Yes. Well, that was in November of 1970. In January of 1971, we went to Germany. And in October of 1972, I was sent back from Germany sick. So my husband flew in the first week of November from Germany, and my brother, who was the same age as my husband, my husband was 8.5 years older than me, and my brother was 8 years and 3 months older than me. And he decided he would go deer hunting with us that year. So we go, and I'm thinking we're going to Magdalena, south of Albuquerque, and we get to Amarillo, and we start turning south. And I looked at him, and I squinted my eyes, and I said, "Where are we going?" And my brother wouldn't look at me. He was sort of snickering into his hand. And my husband said, "Well, I thought we'd go back to Corona and maybe see if we could see that creature you saw." I said, "Take me back to Oklahoma right now." And they both started laughing. They said, "Honey, we are too far from Oklahoma to take you back. We're going to go on down there. You've got two of us to protect you." And I was like, "I'll protect myself. Thank you very much." But so we get to Corona, and when we get there, it's snowing. And then a blizzard comes in while we're setting up our camper, and my brother backs his backside into a prickly pear cactus. So they go into the camper. I go sit in the car with the car running with the heater on, and my husband has to pick prickly pear stickers out of my brother's behind. So the next morning, they decide we're in the exact same area we had been 2 years before, in the meadow by the two buttes. So they decide they're going to go to the small butte and deer hunt. And I told them I would stay in the camper, keep the camper warm. And I told them, I said, "I've got my gun loaded, so if you're going to come up, you better yell at me and let me know if you go to open that door, because I'm going to shoot if that door starts opening and I don't know who's opening it." So it started getting into a whiteout. And my brother starts yelling. He's coming in. So I unlock the door and let him in. And he's white as a sheet. And I said, "Bob, what's wrong?" And he sat down on the couch, and he's unloading his gun. And even after it's unloaded, he's still clicking it, clicking it, clicking it. And I walked over, and I took his rifle away from me, and I laid it up on the bed, and I said, "Bob, what's wrong?" And he said, "Oh, my God, Pat, oh, my God." And I said, "Is something wrong with Ken?" That was my husband. He said, "No." He said, I was getting cold. And he said, the snow was starting to get really thick. And he said, I decided to come back. And he said, I walked right into that creature you saw. He said, except it was almost a dark brown, almost a black. And now my brother was 6'1", and he said it was well over 8 foot tall. And he said he didn't know what was more surprised, him or this creature. And I won't call it an animal. I never felt like it was an animal. But I didn't think it was an ape either. It was just something that I didn't know what it was. But he said it took off one way and he took off the other, heading toward the camper. And I told him, okay. I said, do you want to tell Ken? And he said, no, I don't want him to know. And I said, okay. He said, because, he said, he said, I almost wet my pants. It scared me so bad. And he said, I don't want him to think I'm not as manly as he is. And I looked at him, I said, surely, Bob, Ken is not like that. He would not tease you or anything about it. I said, he's never made fun about me seeing it. He never questioned it, nothing. And he said, I just don't want him to know. So it was getting really white out then, and he went out of the camper and was yelling for my husband, and then we heard 3 shots. So my brother came back in, got his rifle, loaded it, shot 3 times, and then after about another time of the 3 shots, and then him firing another 3 shots, then my husband could find us because it was so thick with the blizzard he couldn't see the camper. And so the next morning, we stayed in the camper all day that day because it was snowing so bad you couldn't get out. So the next morning, we left there, and we went about 25 miles away. And we came up on this bunch of Mexican guys hunting. There were about 12 to 13 of them. And my husband spoke Spanish, so he was talking to them. One guy did speak English. And up in this tree was this big flock of turkeys, and they were hunting turkeys. So they asked us where we were camped, and my husband explained to them where we were camped. And this one that spoke English, he came over to talk to me and my brother. And he said, your husband says you're camped over in that meadow by the 2 buttes. And I said, yes, it's about 20, 25 miles from here. He said, you need to move. And I said, why do we need to move? And he said, well, he said they don't like it known. He said, but there's been some hunters that go in there by themselves, and they just disappear. He said, so they always say it's a hunting accident. He said, but we believe it's bad mojo over there. He said, we don't go over there. He said, there's something evil there. And I thanked him. And when my husband got back in the car, he said, that is so strange. He said, they said that there's bad stuff over there where we're camped. And I said, well, that's what that guy said too, and Bob did too. Well, for the rest of the trip while we were out, my brother stayed right by me. When my husband went off to hunt this other area, my brother didn't go with him. He stayed with me. And then we had a couple of more days there, and it had stopped snowing. We had probably about 6 to 8 inches of snow on the ground. And on the back of the larger butte was this waterfall from a little stream, freshwater spring probably that came off that butte. And the back of it was just straight up rocks going up to the back. It was probably maybe 100 feet up, just a sheer cliff with this water coming off of it. And my brother was in the camper, and my husband and I were going checking to see if we could find any deer sign between the buttes and back where that water pooled in the back of that butte and stuff. And it was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and we stopped. And I had what they call a sniper scope on my rifle. It's only got 3 crosshairs, and they don't come together. It's right in the middle there. As soon as you raise it up, that's where you're going to sight it, is right where there's no crosshair. And he was looking with his binoculars toward the back of this butte. And I was behind him, so I couldn't see what he was looking at. And he turned around and he said, honey, let me have your rifle. I want to look through your scope. And I said, well, what are you looking at? And he said, well, get over here to the side of me. He said, take the binoculars, look at the back of that butte. And I said, okay. So I'm looking, and I'm trying to adjust the binoculars. I can see something on the back of the butte, and it's moving. And when I get it sighted in, it's a black, bigger creature. Now, of course, it had been 2 years. I don't know if the hair color changes, but it was definitely a dark brown or a black, and it was a lot more muscular. And this back of this butte was just sheer ice, and it was just going up it like it was crawling across the floor. It was like it was nothing. It was put out its hand here and put out its other hand there and just going up. And we watched it till it got up over the top and out of our sight. And my husband handed me back my rifle, and I gave him back the binoculars. And I said, well, and the only thing he ever said, he looked at me and he said, well, I don't think it's some damn fool in a monkey suit. And that was the only thing he ever said, and we left the very next morning.
Wow, that's intense. You must have seen the alpha male or something, if it was bigger and blacker and what have you.
Well, that's like I say, I don't know if their color changes as they get older, but it was a lot bigger creature. I mean, it was massive compared to the one I had seen 2 years before.
Yeah.
And like I say, it was just going up this thing like it was nothing. This sheer ice cliff. Just
right.
Boom, 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 boom. And when we got back to Oklahoma, my brother sold every gun he had, except a pistol, never went deer hunting again, never went hunting anywhere again. My husband, we never went back to New Mexico deer hunting. He would get a special license and go hunting every year at Fort Sill when he was here. But we never, ever went back to New Mexico deer hunting.
Right.
So, like I say, the only thing he ever said to me was just at the end of that sighting when I turned and I looked at him, I said, well, and he said, well, I don't think it's a damn fool in a monkey suit.
Right. No. Yeah,
So,
when you see those kind of things, it's not a monkey suit. It's.
No, you could see the muscles. And his arms reaching out. You know how if you've ever watched National Geographic, where it shows the orangutan's arms being so long when it's swinging from tree to tree. That's how it was climbing this ice wall. It was just one hand here, one over here, up. It was like it was nothing.
Right.
And I mean, it was just, it was such intense from the very first time I saw it to the second time I saw the one. Maybe they were the same one, but I do know that the first time we were there was all kinds of game. The next time we were there was not one footprint of a game. There was no deer. There was no bobcats. There was no mountain lions. There were no bird tracks, nothing in the snow except bare footprints.
And the people you ran into, they were saying people were coming up missing there, huh?
Yes, they said that there had been some hunters that had went in that area by themselves, and they never found them.
Wow.
So they said they keep it very hush-hush here. It's because it's a national forest.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy said, people around here don't talk about it. He said, because usually it's people from not around here. He said, people that's here, you don't go over there. He said, you need to move. But we never heard any noise. And I don't know, maybe it was the same one that I saw. But I don't think it could not have known we were in the woods down below it, because we were talking. We weren't trying to be quiet. We were just looking for print in case we wanted to hunt there the next day.
Right.
And it was just going up the. So maybe we had startled it, and it just decided that was the easiest route to get to where it needed to be. I don't know. But it was, I would say, in width and stuff, it was twice as big as the one I had seen before.
Right.
And I'm not good with judging weight, but the one I saw in 1970, I would say was at least maybe 350, 375. The one that we saw climbing the back of the butte in 72, to the dark, blackish-looking one,
Mm-hmm.
he looked like he'd probably weigh about 800 or 900 pounds. He was big.
Right.
I sure wouldn't have wanted.
I don't think it was the same one. I don't think the hair color and stuff would change that quick.
And I think it would have had to put on a whole lot of weight and muscle growth and to get that big in 2 years.
Right.
But like I say, I don't know what held the first one back. Maybe it knew my husband was sitting up there with his gun. Maybe it didn't know how big my rifle was. You know,
Right.
maybe I hid my, I wasn't shaking. I had my rifle very steady. I was holding it around my strap to help steady it. And I'm only 5'2", so they had cut off an inch of the stock and had it customized for me. It was my anniversary gift from my husband in Germany. It was a really pretty gun. It was I still have it. It's a pale blonde stock.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really pretty rifle. And they customized it for me and everything where it was very comfortable for me to use. But like I say, it was like looking at a grizzly bear standing up, and I had a .22. I felt like I didn't have any firepower at all against this thing, so I thought if I got a really good shot, it would have to be through the neck, and hopefully that would damage it enough that it would either take off.
Yeah, well, you did the right thing not shooting, because, I mean, if you had to, you know, that'd be a different deal. But anyway, we're coming up on an hour. We'll just do this and call this part 1. And I'll close the show out, and then we'll start back here in a few minutes, and we'll do the UFO and the ghost stuff on a separate deal.
Okay, that sounds fine.
Okay with you. So everybody out there in YouTube land, I hope you enjoyed that. And that's fascinating Bigfoot stuff there. Now it sounds pretty darn scary to me. I don't want to be out in the woods and run across something that close, but it happens, and you know, you never know where you're going to run into them at, because New Mexico's not kind of a place you would think of it happening, but they do. So anyway, I hope y'all enjoy that. Like I said, if anyone wants to share something, you can contact me at brentonsawin@gmail.com. That'll be in the description if you want to contribute. There's PayPal me link in the description also. And until next time, God bless, and we'll see you on the next show. So be looking for the next show that will be up shortly after, and it'll be Pat's UFO and ghost stuff.